Get in, lads. Today I'm going to be doing a full review of Jamaica's performance at the 2024 Copa America tournament. What that means, I'm going to go over what went wrong, what went right, things I would have changed, things that shouldn't have happened for Jamaica. I'm going to be covering all those things in this video, so stick around if that interests you. And then make sure to like the video if you still enjoyed watching Jamaica play against some of the world's best players in this tournament, because I know I sure did. Being a newfound Reggae Boyz fanatic, I really enjoyed watching them in this tournament. And we actually went to go see them live in Las Vegas, and we vlogged it, so I think the card will show up here or here. I don't know where, but if you haven't watched that video yet, make sure to go watch it and see our experience on our travels to Las Vegas watching them play against Ecuador. But first, I want to start with the pre-tournament expectations that Jamaica had surrounding them. In this group, unfortunately, they obviously finished with 0 points in last place, which is quite unfortunate. I don't think it's deserved fully. I think they should have at least had 1 or 3 points in this tournament. But yeah, expectations at least surrounding them, and at least regarding comments that we've had in our past videos, I think a lot of you watching this video may have had the opinion that they were going to make it out of this group or at least get a win or something. I'm still proud of the team. It's just that the expectations were way higher than what happened, unfortunately. At least by opponent, I did think they could have gotten a result from that Mexico game, and it was in their hands realistically. They could have taken that game from Mexico and gotten a point, but as I'll talk about later, there were some decisions made that kind of ultimately led to Mexico taking out 3 points from that game against Ecuador. I think before the tournament, I would have said that it'd be really hard for them to take anything from that game because Ecuador are my personal favorites for that group, at least before obviously the tournament started. I do think they could have gotten something from that game, and that's the game we went to. They could have. I mean, they really did. Some things didn't go their way, penalty shouts and whatnot, obviously. So that was a little deeper than them, but there's still some things about that game that I didn't like. And then Venezuela, at least before the tournament started, I would have thought that they would have gotten a result against Venezuela because Venezuela, personally, on paper, were the weakest team in this entire group. They won 3 out of 3 games, and they are probably one of the strongest teams in the tournament right now in terms of form. So I was entirely wrong about Venezuela's opinion there. But I did think Jamaica could have gotten something from these 3 opponents, and it's unfortunate that they didn't. Following that, I'm going to go into a bunch of reasons why they didn't. So first of all, the thing that let them down the most in each game was the first half performance. At least in the first 2 games, out of the bat, once the whistle was blown, they did not look ready at all. Versus Mexico, it took them a long time to settle into that game, and honestly, the first 10 minutes or so were really rough for Jamaica. And I was sat there thinking, like, holy crap, Mexico's going to blow them out of the water here. Once they got their composure back into it and were able to execute the game plan, obviously, it did look a lot better for them. But their first half performances, almost in every game, was really poor. And as a result, you cannot rely on the opponent also having a poor first half, or you kicking it back up in the second half. Because if you don't have momentum going past halftime, it's really hard to pick up stuff. And granted, at least in the Ecuador and Mexico game, to be honest, they really did pick it up in the second half in the beginning, and there were both like periods of 15 to 20 minutes where I thought that they might have pulled something out. They might have scored a goal. Unfortunately, they didn't. They did in Ecuador, and they should have scored 2 goals, but that's beside the point. But the first half performances really let them down for the whole tournament. At least in the game against Ecuador, Ecuador was able to score 2 goals in that first half where Jamaica just weren't ready to play them. And that ultimately led to be the difference between 1, 3, or 0 points for Jamaica, and then they ended up losing 3-1 in that game. And in my opinion, because of that first half, they didn't get anything going. And it was really disappointing to watch. I'm going to be honest, it was really disappointing to watch because you kind of want them to come out of the gate ready and prepared and composed. And there were only a few players who were like that fully composed to start the game. Ethan Pinnock and Demarai Gray and Michael Antonio were all very composed, and that makes sense because they're the most seasoned veterans. At least they've played at the highest levels of world football, so they know what to do. Ethan Pinnock, at least at the back, looked marvelously composed, and he was a big reason why the defense looked fairly solid throughout at least the first 2 games. But all the other players looked really scared and nervous, which I understand. I mean, it's your first appearance in the Copa America in a long time. These players haven't played at this high of a level for international football in a good minute, if at all. So obviously they didn't really know what to expect. And every single game they played in was very minimally, Jamaican supported there. At least the game we went to, it was heavily Ecuadorian. I mean, it was probably like 97% Ecuadorian fans there. It was that much. There was a few Jamaican fans there. Obviously, we were there. And if you were there, let us know in the comments down below. But it was very overwhelmingly against them in whatever game they played in, whatever stadium they played in. So that obviously didn't help. And you still, obviously, you're playing against unknown opponents. CONMEBOL is an opponent in itself that Jamaica doesn't really associate itself with too much and doesn't have a lot of experience with, meaning they don't have a whole lot of knowledge as to how to play CONMEBOL teams. And that really showed, at least in these first halves here. It was really hard for them to get anything going in that first half, and they couldn't set the team up in a way that would benefit it the most for them to, attack on goal, or at least push through the defense and not have to worry about counterattacks or anything coming back. Which was also a struggle, is that they just didn't know how to handle the counterattack, and that was a lot of reasons due to the way they set up, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But yeah, first half performances really let them down, and as a result, that's, from in my opinion, that is the biggest reason as to why they couldn't get anything going in this tournament and had no momentum going into the next game and whatnot, is their first half performances. So now let me talk about how they set up the team, which in my opinion was the incorrect way to set up the team. Heimir Hallgrimsson did set it up in a way that he really only knows, and obviously he now is not with Jamaica anymore, so we'll see kind of how that team evolves to be set up next time. There was a couple things wrong with their formation and the way they set up, which I didn't fully like, and I think contributed to them not being able to score. So first of all was the two striker setup, and I personally was an advocate for such a thing. I did make that video earlier about their best possible 11 and how they would set up, and I did say that Shamar and Michael Antonio should start together, but I was entirely wrong. That's how they set up in that first game, exactly to what I said, almost, at least for the attacking wise, and it didn't work at all. Shamar and Michael did not play off each other well enough. It didn't really work. There was absolutely zero creativity, at least from Shamar Nicholson there, and when he did get opportunities, he scuffed it a lot. Truthfully, he did not have a good tournament, and that's okay. We know he's a really good player for Jamaica, and he just did not have a good tournament, and it happens, of course. Obviously it happens. Unfortunately, in this case, it didn't work well enough, which sucks. So at that point, the only game plan that Heimir set up for the team was just to get the ball and boot it forward, and hopefully that one of them, because they're big enough, they can use their strengths to control the ball, or at least deflect it onto another player, and then you can move the players up. And it just wasn't working. CONMEBOL teams are way too aggressive and physical for that to be possible with Jamaica. I think if you do that in the Nations League, or like at least with CONCACAF teams, it's definitely possible, and it almost works against Mexico. But once you start playing Ecuador, and obviously it was not working, and immediately Demarai Gray was warming up, like within the first 15 minutes of the Ecuador game, just because even Heimir knew that that's just was not the way to go, and he shouldn't have went with that anyway. I would more have preferred to see two wingers and one striker up top, which is definitely how they normally set up, especially if Leon Bailey did show up and wanted to play for Jamaica in the tournament. That's how they would have set up, and I do think it would have had a bigger effect on the games instead of two strikers. Goal scoring opportunities between the two players were far and few in between, and even like the goal that they did score against Ecuador, it was a scrappy goal. Truthfully, it was a scrappy goal. I think it was off a set piece. So there wasn't much setup going, and then there was also no buildup leading into the attack, which was a big reason why there was very few goal scoring opportunities. And that leads me to talk about the midfield. Now, the midfield looked poor. Let's be honest. At least in the first game against Mexico, it was very obvious that there was zero midfield, because Heimir chose to play with two central attacking midfielders, and it was very obviously that those two players did not play center mid. They could play center mid. Bobby De Cordova-Reid had a solid game, but there was very little midfield presence against a Mexico midfield who are very crucial to how that team plays. So it looked very obvious. And then going into the game against Ecuador, they did bring in Damian Lowe, which I said they should have. Truthfully, he did not have the best game. It still didn't look correct as to how they were playing. So the midfield was a big reason also as to why there was no build-up into the attack, and why there was also too much build-up from the opponents on when they were playing defense. Granted, there isn't many true center mids in this team. There's a lot of players that tend to play in the midfield for Jamaica, but that still isn't their main position when they play for club, such as Damian Lowe, who tends to play center back and club level, and then also as well as Joe Lottie, who also plays CDM/center back. He can't play in a center mid role. So Heimir did have a worse team in terms of midfield to pick from, which sucks, but you could have taken the risk and brought on Lambert. You could have brought on Anderson a bit earlier, a bit sooner. And that could have changed the game, at least the midfield for Jamaica. But it was really obvious that there was not much hope in advancing the ball through the midfield, and that's why they didn't do it that much. It was also just really hard. CONMEBOL has very good midfields, especially when you're playing against Ecuador. And it's really hard to build through that midfield, which is why Lambakisa and Greg Lay took on a lot of the build-up, moving the ball forward and moving into the attack, because they just kind of had to. There was no midfield presence, and you can't play passing football through or possession-based football through it, which in the way that Heimir set this team up. Now, I will say, though, there were parts of the setup that I did really like. I think Lambakisa had a really good game against Mexico. Didn't do as much in the following games, but he had a beautiful game against Mexico. I think he was one of their best players, if not top 2 or top 3 players on that Jamaica side. And I do like the use of the wingbacks, because they did provide some sort of cover on both defense and attack for Jamaica. So that was a good way to set it up. I do think the defense was also very solid. I think Jamali Waite in goalkeeper proved that he was a very adequate replacement for the injured Andre Blake, and he did his job for sure. Like I said earlier, Ethan Pinnock was very, very good in that defensive line and kept everybody in order and kept that composure that I think other players kind of needed to see for them to play a little bit better. Otherwise, Deshaun Bernard had a really good first game. Joe Lottie was decent. He didn't have the best game against Ecuador, but otherwise, defensively, they looked somewhat solid, and that looked to be the strongest section of the formation in this tournament for sure. So defense and goalkeeper are not going to win you games, especially when you can't be scoring down the line or down the field. So otherwise, I think the team would have benefited very much so with the presence of Leon Bailey. I think he would have produced a lot, and he would have literally entirely changed the system as to how Heimir wanted to play. So it is unfortunate that the Federation and Leon Bailey are at odds right now, and that he couldn't make an appearance or didn't want to or whatnot. We'll see if he does moving forward, especially into the World Cup, because I do think, depending on the new manager that comes in, he could be a vital part of Jamaica's World Cup hopes. So yeah, that was really unfortunate that he's not here, because I do think he would have added a lot to this team. But as a result, I think this is where Jamaica's dual national push really, really needs to flourish here, because you can't be losing just one player and it changes the whole team completely. This is why I think Jamaica, you should watch our 2 videos on 7 players. I think it's 14 players now that are eligible to play for Jamaica, and then you grab one of those players and hope that they can provide a similar output that Leon would. But the whole team was changed by his absence, and you just can't afford that going into a major tournament, especially one like Copa America. And then the last main thing I have that is a big reason as to why they couldn't get a result are the substitutions. I don't think Heimir had a really good tournament in terms of the substitutions he made, especially with the game against Mexico. The game against Mexico was the absolute perfect example of what not to do when you're in a 0-0 stalemate, especially in a game where you could have gotten a result. In the second half, Jamaica were looking good for a little bit. They had a little bit of momentum for probably around 15-20 minutes, and it looked like they could have scored a goal. And with the right substitutions and changes made to how they play, you have a higher likelihood of scoring a goal there and maybe taking 3 points from that game against Mexico. But when it was looking good for Jamaica, Heimir, I think, kind of panicked, and he didn't really know what to do and what changes to make. I would have personally brought a player like Cephas on, a player like Dixon on, instead of taking an attacking player off. So what he did was he took Demarai Gray off, and he replaced a center back with another center back, but he brought 2 defenders on, and that really only left Shamar and Mike Antonio at the top, and it really just accelerated the loss for them, to be honest, because by then, the only thing they could have done is boot the ball up, hope to make a touch. And like I said earlier, hopefully that there's some players moving forward and then they string a few passes and whatnot and get a goal from that. But Jamaica still could have gotten something from that game. And mere minutes later, Mexico scored a goal on them. And Jamaica just were not set up by that point to get anything from the game, whether it would be a draw or a win. So substitutions were really, really a bad portion of Heimer's game plan here, and a big reason why they couldn't get much going. The substitutions he made there were way too negative and way too late. I think Heimir also tended to wait too long to make these substitutions, and also as a reason because he was probably panicking in some scenarios. He could have made sooner substitutions to take out players that weren't performing that well in a more attacking sense for sure, and they could have gotten a bigger rejuvenation in the third half of the pitch and maybe have gotten more goals from that. But he really, really chose to stick with a way more defensive approach, and that's what's going to happen with a manager who really only knows how to defend against big teams. He really didn't know how to take the game to the opponents, especially in scenarios where taking the game to the opponents would have resulted in something good. Unfortunately, that just didn't happen for him, and as a result, he did resign from the nation. And I don't think he did a terrible job with the nation overall, but I do think he wasn't the right option for this new era of Jamaican football, which really, really needs a strong vocal coach who knows what to do in a bunch of different scenarios. I do think he should have had more time with the team. Obviously, that was up to him because he did resign. I do think there are other managers in other CONCACAF nations that should be gone sooner than Heimir was, aka Greg Berhalter, aka Jimmy Lozano. So I don't know if he should have left this soon, but this does give Jamaica an opportunity to find a better coach that could lead them into a new era of CONCACAF domination, especially when Mexico is struggling and the USA, as of right now, in this moment, are struggling really, really hard. But yeah, substitutions could make or break the game for your team. And in this tournament, they tended to always break the game for Jamaica, which is unfortunate. And I do think it's a really big reason why they lost. It's a really big reason why they couldn't move on, because they just don't know how to close out games and they don't know how to start games. They only have a decent middle of the game, and that's not enough to win in high stakes games against really, really top opponents like Golden Bowl teams. But you know what? Even despite these little, moments of bad decisions and obstacles in Jamaica's way, I still had a really, really good time watching Jamaica play in this tournament. And I do think that they are a force to be reckoned with, at least in CONCACAF, for years to come. They just need the right guidance, and the federation needs to figure it out, because Jamaica has the talent to become a top 4, maybe top 3 team in the entire region, and as a result, they could qualify for the World Cup, and they could do something in the World Cup. And I really think Jamaica has the opportunity to do something like that. It just needs to, a few changes need to be made. The Copa America, I think nobody's upset that they're out of the group stage. I think everybody was kind of like, okay, we didn't expect a whole lot more, but that gives you now a little bit of freedom to explore how good you can be leading into the 2026 World Cup. And I think that needs to be their main focus. And if they don't capitalize on that, there would not be a better time to do so. So Jamaica, you really need to get it together, because now is the time to do so. And I think a lot of Jamaican fans are really maybe not expecting you to, but wanting you to. This is the time to get it together and start winning games against big opposition, because you can do it. 100% you can do it. And in the next Copa America, in the World Cup, next tournaments, whatever, I think Jamaica are definitely a team that you need to watch out for if you're not a Jamaican fan already, because they could do a lot of damage to your nation or any other nation that they want to face off against. They could do a lot of damage with the right guidance and progress and whatnot. And this is the time to do it. 100% this is the time to do it. But otherwise, that's going to be it for my review of Jamaica's performance in the 2024 Copa America. And like I said, if you guys want the same kind of video for other nations, leave a like and let us know in the comments down below what nation you want us to do, because we will absolutely get around to doing it if that's the video you guys want. Otherwise, subscribe to the channel for more CONCACAF, Copa America, and Reggae Boyz content, because we have a lot planned for the upcoming months. So, yeah, make sure to subscribe down below, hit the notification bell so you know when these videos get released right away. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you guys in future videos, and take it easy, guys.